I was flunking out of high school. I barely made it through. I graduated bottom of my class. I went to college and flunked out of college and was seeing someone that was killed in a car wreck. I was an absolute mess. Went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, after a few months, he sat me down very seriously and said, I have a conclusion I want to share with you, and I think it's very serious. Please listen. And I'm like, yeah, all ears. And he said that you are so afraid to fail that you won't let yourself try.
Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, the podcast by and for EO Nashville. And we learn all the stories of entrepreneurs as they start, build, grow, scale, and exit businesses and run their lives. And with me, and my name is Eric Jackson. I always forget to introduce myself. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Good to be here.
Good to be with you. And today, we have one of the most talented people I know. Mr.
We do? Who's coming in?
Coming through the door. No, Scott, you are also one of the most humble people that I have ever known. Gracious. I could just go on, but I'm not going to. I'm going to ask you one question.
Okay.
If there was one word that would describe how you have been able to have all of this success, what would that word be?
Let me think about it.
Where could you find this information?
Be Tenacious.
Good choice.
Absolutely. Tenacity is the key. I am not the prettiest. I am not the smartest. I'm not the anythingest. Other than when I find something I love, I don't give up.
I've seen it in action. He's not lying.
When did you know you loved the work that you're doing?
So this was the story. I know it's the Decision podcast, and I really was hoping you'd ask that instead of it really was before I was in business. And I was at rock bottom. I was flunking out of high school. I barely made it through. I graduated bottom of my class. I went to college and flunked out of college and was seeing someone that was killed in a car wreck. I was an absolute mess. Went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, after a few months, he sat me down very seriously and said, I have a conclusion I want to share with you, and I think it's very serious. Please listen. And I'm like, yeah, all ears. And he said that you are so afraid to fail that you won't let yourself try. And he went into reasons a little more, which we won't do here. But that revelation was so powerful to me that I actually had like a hysterical breakdown over the relief of finally knowing what was wrong with me. Why couldn't I do my homework? Why did every time I tried to do my homework, my brain get cloudy and my skin would start to itch and I'd start to sweat and I would devolve to tears over just doing my homework. And what I discovered was I was so afraid of failing that I wouldn't let myself try, because in my mind, I wouldn't really fail if I didn't really try.
That'd make a great song.
It would.
By the way, we got so many inside
coming soon
jokes.
To a Spotify near you. Yeah. And so the decision to try is really what got me into this business. I was waiting tables at a Howard Johnson's. And for those of you that don't know that is a crappy mid-level restaurant on the side of highways all over the U.S. for a bunch of years. And a shiny tour bus rolled in and I was really depressed. I was about out of school. They weren't going to let me stay. And I said, I want to wait on whoever that is. And these guys sat in my section and I was so excited because the bus had the space shuttle on the side of it. And I'm a NASA nut. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. These guys, like, maybe they work for NASA. And I'm watching them get off the bus and they're wearing all black and they got hair down to their ass. And I'm like, they don't look like they work for NASA. So I take their drink orders and I go, why the bus? And in the thickest Irish accent, one of them goes, we work for the band U2. And I went, huh. I walk into the back in the kitchen, my mind completely blown, going, how do you work for the band U2? Like, so I will go back out there and I say, I'm sorry, but what do you mean you work for the band U2? Like, I don't understand. I would think you'd have to be Bono's cousin or something. And they all crack up. There's 8 of them at the table. And the guy who seemed to be kind of in charge laughed and goes, well, we put on the show, Scott. We do the lights, the sound. He goes, we're all the very best in the world at what we do. And he puts his arm around the guy next to him and he goes, and this is AJ. He's Bono's cousin.
Oh, wow.
And everybody cracks up. AJ and I are still friends to this day. And what I gleaned there was exciting to me. I've always loved music. Like, it was a place to hide for me when I was a kid. It was an identity. And these people could work in music without being musically talented. Like, what is that? And 3 months of me being in a shell came out all at once. And I was apparently funny because they, by the end of dinner, said, they were like, you got to come to our next show. And so I went to the show and I had an amazing time and I started to glean this incredible industry. And they were like, do you want to come back tomorrow? And I'm like, yes. So 3-hour drive, by the way, 3-hour drive back, 3-hour drive back the next day. They're like, come early and we'll show you around a little bit. And so I came early and I parked and thought, God, are they even going to know I'm out here? As soon as I parked the car, someone got out of one of the buses and goes, oh, Scotty, come on. And they grab me and bring me backstage. And we're not backstage 3 minutes. And Bono and Edge walk up to this guy and start talking to him, asking him a question. He finishes the question and goes, this is Scott. He's hilarious. I was not. I was like, what? Holy shit.
And this is when they were huge.
Yeah. The Joshua Tree had just released. They were the biggest band in the world. They were my heroes. And
you're just standing there.
So, Edge kind of gestures and Bono's like, okay. And I'm like, nope, not hilarious. They walked away and I'm walking away. And what struck me was that I had just met 2 of my heroes, but I was actually more interested in the guy that was walking me around because I had discovered this incredible thing you could do. And a little bit later, I'm standing in the middle of the crowd by the soundboard and the lights went out. And this is before lawyers were allowed to have billboards. So it's pitch black in there. Nobody cares if you fall and break your neck, right? The olden days, when the lights went out in an arena, it was pitch black. Like you couldn't see anything. And I'm standing there in the dark and the hair went up on the back of my legs and hair on the back of my neck, maybe my legs too. And I just was like, oh my God, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to be a part of this. I love music. I love technology. I love people. I love the idea of seeing the world. Holy shit. And a moment later, I realized that I was going to have to try. So in the dark, standing there with everyone going nuts for that second show, I made myself a promise that I would start trying and never stop trying until I achieved that dream. That's the decision that changed my life.
Wow. And so this starting to try again and started was it instantaneous that it was easy for you to try?
No. I had several anxiety attacks, nervous breakdowns. I did some crazy things to get in the industry. Crazy. I dropped out of the college that was about to throw me out. I sold my super sport Camaro. I quit my 3 jobs and much to my parents' dismay, climbed into my Subaru Brat, which is that little tiny pickup truck, put mattresses in the back, foam mattresses, and drove to the next U2 show with a plan so stupid. I was going to sneak in every day and work for free and learn the industry until hopefully they discovered that I would be useful to them. And for 5 weeks, I lived in my car. I ate shit food. I didn't really sleep. I almost drove off the road in the middle of the night 1 million times, but I went to every U2 show, snuck in, almost got arrested 3 times, got walking pneumonia at one point. But I started to learn the industry. Eventually, I got in trouble with the union in, I think, Buffalo. And my presence, by this point, I was kind of a mascot on the tour. The crew was rooting for me. They weren't giving me a pass or a job, but they laughed every time they saw me and like, come here, help me do this. And I was living the dream and thought I was on my path. And I rounded the corner with a road case, and one of them said, go to the nearest exit. We'll see you in Pittsburgh. I'm like, what's up? He goes, get out of here. Go to the nearest exit. We'll see you in Pittsburgh. So I drove from Buffalo to Pittsburgh, sat in the parking lot. When I heard the tour buses come in and I saw the lights come on in the front lounge, I climbed up on there, and they had sort of a come to Jesus with me and said like, hey, because of the union accused us of having non-union labor, it became a thing. They fined the band $5,000. But the problem is upper management found out about you. And upper management's like, that kid's going to fall asleep in the middle of the night, or a road case is going to land on him, or he's going to fall out of a truck and the band's going to get sued. He's got to go. So that was it. I failed. But I had made an impression on them. And one of them in particular, Lawrence Anderson, said, what do you want to do? And I said, video. And the funny thing is, I hadn't done video the whole time I was there. I was doing mostly lighting and power.
Did you have any experience in video?
No, but video was brand new. And I had lots of time to think about it as I was driving from city to city. And I thought I should do video. It was literally, I think, the second tour to have video. The first tour was Journey's Escape or Frontiers tour, whatever one time's out there. And when they didn't have their video system, U2 had it because there was one. And I thought, well, if I get into lighting or sound, I'll be at the bottom rung of a really tall ladder. If I get into video, it's probably like a 2-rung ladder, right? And he was like, huh. And so he gave me some advice, and I followed that. Sent myself to school for the projectors and got a job in Washington, D.C. doing corporate and political video, and just mostly sitting in ballrooms wearing a skinny tie, and someone up front goes, and if you direct your attention to the screen, you'll see how our missile is going to win the whatever. And it would be like military guys showing videos for congressmen or software people or whatever. And it was so boring and awful. And to get more on point to your question, I was broken through the whole process. Like, would go to a corner and cry. I remember climbing under banquet tables and crying and trying to pull it together enough that I could climb back out. But I didn't give up. And I worked my way through that fear. And like anything, you find that the fear is usually worse than the reality. And so little by little, I started being tenacious back then. I wouldn't say I was wasn't good at it yet. They were more like the actions of a cornered animal. I'd seen my life becoming less and was desperate for something to not feel so bad about myself. So the reality of not trying was worse than the pain of trying at that point.
How did you keep it going when you went from having fun on the U2 tour to doing corporate video and realizing there's a gap here?
I was learning the equipment, and I knew I was learning. And so that helped. But I'd made myself a promise, and I saw where I was heading. I mean, I was always told that I was going to be the first kid in our family to go to college, and to go and to be flunking out. I just didn't want the shame. I was afraid of the shame as much as I was afraid of failing, I guess. I started to learn that not trying is failing. And so it was a decision, but it felt like it wasn't. It was like, I can't quit. I can't quit. I can't quit. If I quit, I'll fail.
So when did you make the decision that, hey, I've got enough knowledge now. I'm going to make that next step and get out of something that maybe didn't excite you?
I loved the company I worked for. It was a company called Future View. The hands that owned it were great people. I had great coworkers. I loved them. And I desperately wanted to get them into music. And one of their salespeople used to be Kool and the Gang's monitor engineer. And Michael and I were scheming, and he got us a gig doing what I thought was the Bud Fest tour, but I can't find it on the web. But it was a tour. It was like 6 cities. The first show was in Atlanta. It was not a single act I'd ever heard of. It was all urban music and no one I'd ever heard of. And I was pumped. After a year and a half of the skinny tie and my cheap suit.
Boring presentations that you had to sit through all of it.
I mean, I remember squeezing my thigh so hard, tears were running down my face, trying to stay awake during these presentations because
you're inside.
Yeah, you're operating the show, but it's not like.
Yeah, it's not exciting. There's no energy.
Yeah, it's like every 8 minutes you hit play and dissolve something up or something. You're not really doing
the energy
anything.
Of the show that you were at with you two. It was absence, any
Absolutely.
of the energy or the music that you even liked.
So I go into this stadium and the PA is thumping and there's, 45,000 people there and we were awful. We were so bad that a guy came up to me during the show and said, "Are you part of the video?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm standing by this projector and he goes, "You should turn it off, man." And I'm like, We were awful. So tail between legs, I go in the office and we're like, all right, Is
this like everything you're filming is right in front of everyone?
Live.
And yes,
and we were awful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just bad cuts, bad angles or everything?
No, we had really old technology. We had tube cameras and they didn't do well in low light and the spotlights weren't very bright and all of the flesh tones were very dark and you couldn't see people. And have you ever seen really old footage of tube cameras? They smear. When you get them in too much gain, they kind of have this trail effect behind them.
Yeah.
It was awful. And I died for about 3.5 hours that night. And then we had a meeting and we were trying to figure out how to do it better. And we came out of the meeting going, okay, we're learning. And then the next day the phone rang and it was the client. And he's like, "You guys are so fired." And I went, yeah. Probably right. And, but I took a page out of my old playbook from U2. I had snuck into all those shows and worked for free. The next stop on the tour was Washington, D.C., which is where I was living. So I asked for the weekend off and I put my fake laminate on that I'd had on from the U2 days. And I drove to the stadium and went, okay, it's one thing to sneak into a U2 show as a 19-year-old kid. It's another thing to be almost 21 and be the guy who's on the company that just got fired, sneaking in to a show. There would be probable cause that I was there to do harm. And I'm like, this is where I really get arrested. And if I get arrested, am I going to get fired and all that? But I pulled it together. I watched for a while. I pretended to read a magazine. Back then we had these things called magazines.
Heard of them.
And I was watching the exit and kind of laid it out. And I snuck in and went up to this guy that was working there and asked him all sorts of questions about what he did. And how do you get a job like this? He goes, well, the previous video company was awful. And I'm like, yeah. And he said a few things that pissed me off. And I'm not really good at lying. And so I had done pretty good up until then. But all of a sudden he goes, who are you? And I go, I'm the other video company. Well, then he was pissed off. And so we start yelling at each other and this other guy comes up and he's like, whoa, what's going on here? And instead of yelling what a jerk this guy is, I yell, I'm pissed off because I'm frustrated with my life and I'm yelling at this guy because of it. And the other guy goes, turns and walks away. And the first guy the guy that walked up goes, well, that's interesting. Tell me about that. He was kind of digging it. So I tell him my story. It turns out he used to work for FutureView. He'd started his own company and I just never thought about working for him because I couldn't leave FutureView. They were good to me. So I was stuck. And as I turned to walk away, he goes, Scott, I just got hired to do the Rolling Stones tour and I'd really like to talk to you about it. And I went, oh, wow. So there's a lot to the story, but I had a 3-hour interview and was offered the job and went into FutureView so upset when I went to tell him I was quitting that halfway through I said, all right, I'm not leaving. I can't do it. You guys have been too good to me. And to their credit, the Hanrahans, I talked to James about that. I've reconnected with so many people because of the book. It's been great. But in trying to get some facts together, I reached out to James and we laughed about it. But James said, they got really quiet for a minute and he said, you need to leave. And I was like, oh, am I fired? And he goes, no, but you'll stay here for 2 more years and you'll realize that we aren't your dream. And then you'll be disillusioned and then you'll leave us. Or we can just tell you to leave now and go chase your dream. And all we ask in return, even though we're the ones that trained you up enough so you can actually do it, is that you speak kindly of us. And I'm like, oh, absolutely.
What a loving leader.
Oh, they were great.
Yeah,
they're great.
Amazing.
And it was so fun reconnecting. I reconnected with so many people writing the book because I'm like, am I getting these facts right? And James was one of them. We had a great talk. Yeah.
So you tour the world with the Rolling Stones.
I get hired by the Rolling Stones, and that's it, man.
You're off and running.
I'm on the bus. I'm not living in my Subaru anymore. At 6'2", I had to curl up in a ball. I'd wake up every morning so knotted up, and it'd be hot as hell inside that thing. And yeah. And the next thing you know, I remember I got on the bus the first night. And the bus started rolling and I'm looking around at everyone because I'm just having this moment and everyone else has been on tour before and they're just talking. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm on the bus. And right then the bus driver goes, hey, we're going to Canada. So bring me your passports. I run and get my passport and I sat in the front seat and just watched the world go by and watched all these cars look up and go, I wonder who's in that bus. And I'm like, me, I'm in that bus. And that was the start. And I spent 13 months with the Stones going all over the world. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, I just turned 21. The youngest kid on the tour, 450 people. It was the biggest tour that had gone out ever.
I think you told me they had 2 sets of crews, right? Because there were so much equipment.
No, they had 7.
Did I imagine 7?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there were 4 sets of the raw structure. So if A was having a show on it, they were A, B, C, and D. Then B was built and they were loading in lights and sound because they had 2 sets of lights and sound. And then C was probably in transit or had just been torn down. And D had just had a show and was being torn down. So there were 4 sets of structure. And then there was a red and blue team for pretty much all the lights and sound. And then there were 38 people and 3 tractor trailers full of equipment that it had to be at every show. Soundboards, once they're set, you don't want to change them. You don't want to, so the soundboards had to be there. My video projectors had to be there. So I was one of the universal crew that went to every show. I got a watch from Mick Jagger for perfect attendance.
Oh, wow.
And people who missed one day did not get the watch and they were pissed. They're like, I don't get a watch.
Were they fun to work with?
They were amazing to work with. Yeah. Incredibly well run. Tons of respect for Mick Jagger as a businessman. Really inspiring.
I think it's interesting you said businessman because I don't think a lot of people think of musicians or artists.
Some are, some aren't.
Yeah.
The best ones are. The best ones bring a lot to the industry.
Well, are they a visionary or what is their role in like, if you're speaking music and they are running a show, are they having most of the vision of how a show looks? Or is there other people that are in charge of that? Depending
on the artist, like a Brad Paisley's all about how his show looks, but another one might be all about the money. I probably won't name the ones that are all about the money because that's maybe doesn't sound as exciting to their audience. But I have artists who pay big attention to the money. Just like humans, they're wired differently and have different skills. Mick was a big picture CEO. And absolutely, he was running a massive organization. I mean, that tour had 450 people. He probably had another 100 people on the Rolling Stones staff full time, if not more. Big operation. And he was definitely, he had great management. There were tons of people doing other things, but he was in on all of it.
So when did you make the decision that, I love this, I want to do this, now I want to do it for myself?
I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So my business partner, my boss at the time, who was one of the owners of Performance AV, was where I worked after Future View. He became like a father to me. a tremendous mentor. And I realized that video was changing and that people were doing things with their video screens other than just putting live images up. So I hit him up and said, hey, I think there's a whole industry here where we could create visuals for shows and that would make us more appealing. And I want your permission to start a little company in Moonlight. I'm going to spend like $50,000. So I want to make it a tax thing and its own entity. But I'm going to buy a camera and an editing system and basically all the things you can do with your phone now cost about $50,000 worth of heavy equipment back then to do. And I said, I want your permission to Moonlight. And he said, no. I was really surprised by that. He'd always been so supportive of me. And 2 weeks later, he said, are you still thinking about that? And I'm like, yeah, honestly, I'm not going to do it without you, but I don't understand why you said no. And he said, it scared me. I was afraid I'd lose you because I think you are starting an industry. There was no industry that did this. There was not a thing. There's not a company that did it. And he said, so what I've decided is I'm going to split it with you. So what did you say? It was $50,000. I'm going to give you $25,000 and we're going to do this together. 50-50, which is always a crazy idea. Nobody had say. And I said, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to lose your money. I don't want that pressure. And he goes, it's not a ton of money to me. And I would much rather lose $25,000 than you. And so we started a creative company. And I'm proud to say, I believe it's the first creative company. There were people doing creative for tours, but everybody was hiring their brother-in-law that went to film school or their music video director. And those people were incredibly talented and they did some amazing work. But most of them, if not all of them, couldn't get out of the rectangle. They were conditioned to tell a story inside the box. And that's not what a concert is. The screens are a part of a much bigger picture. And so they typically failed to understand that sometimes the screen should just be a backdrop, or maybe just putting some powerful words on the screen would communicate what the song needs, or it could just be colored patterns that dance to the music. And then once in a while, it's a full-on music video that helps tell the story of the song. But that wasn't what was happening. Most people were making music videos to put on the screen. And so we became really popular really quickly, and it did augment us. That went great. I decided to open a Nashville office for him after he moved me to Nashville. I didn't ask him. I told him. I said, I'm opening your Nashville office. You're not paying me, but you're giving me 10% of the profit on every bit of work I get. And he's like, wait, what? And I said, it's not a discussion. This is what we're doing. I love you. And how would you like 90% of the money you're not getting? And he goes, well, that sounds pretty good. I'm like, cool, leave it to me, but I want 10%. And he's like, okay. And we got other tours and things were growing and going wonderfully. And I loved my life. And we were doing the creative on the tours. And I was throwing huge parties every month, like massive parties, cops coming. Life was great. And I got a phone call and my friend said, sit down. And I was in a hot parking lot in Florida, so I couldn't sit down. And he said, there was a carjacking and someone shot Lee in the head and he's gone. So my boss, my mentor, my father figure in a lot of ways, was gone. My decision to start Moo came in its current form as a video production company who does shows. Came about 3 months later when one of the employees called me and said, I know you're a wreck, but it's time to make some decisions. I've taken the liberty of talking to the employees, and they all said if you started a company, they'd come work for you. And I've taken the liberty of talking to the clients, and they said they would hire you, and how could they help? And I know you probably never dreamed of owning a video production company. I know you'd rather do creative stuff than this, but I just think it'd be a really cool way to keep some part of Lee alive.
Wow.
And that last part got me. So it was a decision, but it was really not a decision to be an entrepreneur. It was a decision to keep some part of Lee alive. And one of the biggest struggles I had was 4 years later, after not sleeping, I started the company on credit cards, and it was just nuts the way I started the company. I don't know how my business manager survived the decisions I was making. Like, thank you, Alice. It was her birthday yesterday. Yeah. And 4 years in, I woke up one morning and said, I haven't slept in 4 years and Lee's still dead. And that was tough. And I took a little bit and I reevaluated and I stepped back and I realized that I love the people that work for me. I love the work still. And I really liked our clients. And so I, in my mind, switched why I did it to maybe a better reason than to keep somebody alive who was gone. And I will say the next big thing for me was about 7 years in, had 40-something employees and started having anxiety attacks again and didn't know why. And I went to Alice and said, why? People run way bigger companies than this. What am I doing wrong? And she said, I don't know. The next day she called me into her office and said, there's a thing called Today's CEO. It's a 1-week-long class at Vanderbilt. You should go to that. And so I paid my money and went. And the most important thing was the required reading was the E-Myth. And before I went to school, I read the E-Myth. And halfway through the E-Myth, I went, you idiot. And for those of you that don't know, the E-Myth is basically a book that says the entrepreneurial myth is that if you're good at making donuts, you should run a donut chain. And the myth is that because you're good at making donuts, you'd be good at doing a business.
Of course.
And I think I was really good at doing video and was not a manager, did not know how to be an entrepreneur. And so that book and that course helped. And I also joined EO and got paired with Eric Jackson and some other fantastic gentlemen. Mm. And over the course of that year, figured out, it's quick to figure out that you need to put systems and processes in place. What I figured out was how to let go over the course of the next year, how to stop touching everything, how to put people that are great at managing in management spots. And I'm really grateful for that journey and EO's help with that journey.
And how did you finally let go?
Hiring the right people. I found it to be fairly easy. I don't know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Mm. So when I hired the right people and I trusted them and I felt like they were making better decisions, but they also were getting all the details. I'm a creative and maybe an entrepreneur, right? And we don't do details.
Yeah.
We have ideas and we run from idea to idea and make everyone else around us crazy. And I put people in place that I loved and trusted and let them start running the company. And then we'd have meetings and I go, here's where we're going now. We're going to climb that hill and it's going to be awesome. And then they would figure out how we were going to climb it and what direction we were going. And if I came to them the next day and said, we're going to climb that hill, and they'd be like, awesome. Right after we climbed the one you told us we were climbing yesterday. And I'd go, okay.
So what'd you do with your time when you're letting go? You got a team. Mm-hmm. Where did your efforts go then?
I focused more on the things I liked, relationships. And guess what happens when you focus on like relationships? They get bigger and you get more clients and you spend time out on the road. And the opening act is like, we definitely want to use you. And some of those opening acts become the next big act. So that was the first step. But I also kind of caught the entrepreneurial bug. So I I split off creative because the people running the hardware of the business, that's a different mindset than the creatives who are designing the show. And I had put them all together when Lee died. So I split them apart because my new guy who really wanted structure, the creatives were driving him nuts and he was driving the creatives nuts. And so I split them into two separate companies, which let them both breathe and do their thing. And then there was a company called Center Staging in bankruptcy. And three of us went in and bought that and worked it out of bankruptcy. I bought a massive building called the Steel Mill and turned it into a rehearsal facility. So, it spun up a few more businesses. And then just from there, I'd like to think that the biggest thing I did was start architecting my life a little more too. So this is the podcast is called The Decision, right? One of my favorite decisions was inspired by Tim Ferriss. I went on this thing called Summit Series and met Tim and hit it off with him. And for 4 years straight, I went to this week-long thing called Summit Series. And Tim and I would hang out. He's not, I don't want to claim he's one of my better friends. He never was. I never even had his cell phone number. When we were there, I'd spend time with him. And he was inspiring. I mean, how many people have you heard of that have said, well, Tim Ferriss really inspired me? Well, Tim Ferriss really inspired me. And here's how. Late one night, I read his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and just loved it. It's nuts. Late one night, after probably too many drinks, I go, Tim, you don't have to answer this, but did you really do all that crazy thing, all that crazy stuff you said you did in your book? And he got quiet for a second. I'm like, oh God, I shouldn't have asked. I'm like, you don't have to answer me. Like I just, and I'm crawling a little bit. And after a little silence, he goes, I did all of it. He goes, but you know, from knowing me that, you know, I had a fiance and she left me because I was a workaholic and I went on this drunken binge in England and that was nuts. And that was in the book. But when I came back to my business after totally abandoning it, when I had that meltdown and saw that it was running better without me, I decided I was going to run an experiment. And that experiment was going to include doing crazy things and writing about it. So I did do everything in the book, but I made the decision to do those things knowing I was writing a book. And I went, that's a great answer. Went to bed that night. Only a few points in my life have I sat straight up in bed. Woke up the next morning, sat straight up in bed and said, son of a gun. Tim Ferriss did not have a life worth writing about, which arguably he did, and then write about it. More to the point, Tim started writing and then had a life worth writing about because he wanted to make the book better. And I made myself a promise sitting up in bed that I was going to start living my life like I was writing a book, never thinking I would actually write a book. But I was going to ask myself at every juncture, would this make the next chapter more interesting? And if the answer was yes, and it wouldn't blow up my life, Tim was pretty willing to blow up everything. I didn't want to do that. People were counting on me, whatever. But if it wouldn't totally blow up my life, I was going to do it. And I made some crazy decisions based on that. I learned to ice skate so I could play ice hockey at 35. And the spoils of that were amazing. I went to Antarctica. I guess the biggest one is I was told as a kid I couldn't sing. And I believed that my whole life. That's why I was so excited to get into behind the scenes in music. I got drunk at a party. I don't drink anymore, by the way, but it used to be a big part of my social life. And I got drunk at a party in Norway and started singing along with the radio. And there was a band at this party at like 4 a.m. And they go, we're calling you up on stage tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, I don't sing. And they're like, yeah, you do. And I'm like, no, I don't sing. And they're like, yeah, you do. We're calling you on stage tomorrow. And I went, well, okay, that wasn't the big decision, but that would be interesting. I got up on stage. I sang. I'm like, I'm going to forget the words. They're like, we'll give you an iPad. And so I have this photo of me in my first time on stage. There's an iPad, my first one, singing to the crowd and horrified. I hop off stage and think, well, that was awful. And there's polite applause. And I go to the bar and the barmaid's this beautiful Norwegian. And I go, poof, I would like all of the beer, please. I can't believe I just did that. That was awful. But no one wanted to hear that. Why? And I look up at her and she's not moving. And I really want that beer. And she goes, I have goosebumps. And I went, what? And then the band got off stage and said, Scotty, you need to join our band. And I'm like, join a band in Norway? No. Stupid. But I got thinking about it. And 2 or 3 drinks later, I went, oh, what's the worst that could happen? It won't blow up my life. So they asked again. And I said, yes. And everybody cheered. And then we all went, well, how the hell does this work? And I said, just send me your schedule. I'll fly out to the shows I can fly to. And I became the guest vocalist on the regular of a band called Spinning Wheels in Norway. Started flying to Norway and singing in a band after thinking my whole life I couldn't sing.
So at a forum meeting, I believe, Scott tells me that he's been doing some of this stuff, and he says, I've been taking some vocal lessons. I'm trying to get better. And he plays some audio of himself singing. And I just went, dude, you can sing. And furthermore, like, you sounded more like Johnny Cash in this particular song than Johnny Cash did. It blew my mind. And one of the proudest moments I have had of you.
Was there did you ever just visualize, like, in the shower? Did you ever just, as a kid, you play around with, like, imagining you're on stage? You never had that.
Nope. I love singing in the car. I love singing in the shower, but I was in like a choir thing when I was in elementary school, and the teacher walked over, looked at me and said, someone over here sounds terrible. And I was really used to not being good at things back then. And I thought, well, it's me. So I started mouthing the words and got myself out of doing that, and just thought, I can't sing. I'm a baritone. And I grew up in the 80s, and everyone's singing in their falsetto, high voices, head voices. I couldn't do that. So my singing along with the radio kind of reinforced it. And then I started singing Johnny Cash, who was a baritone. He had tons of range, but he sang a lot of stuff down where it was really comfortable for me. It turns out I could sing. I worked hard at it. So the decision was nuts, but I also decided I was going to get good at it. So I started taking vocal lessons, a lot of them. And I also had glossophobia prior to that. And
you had what?
A fear of public speaking.
Oh.
Huge fear of public speaking. Like, the first time I went up on stage, we won an award. We won Video Company of the Year at Moo TV. I accepted the award, walked off stage, and fell against the wall backstage and thought I was having a stroke. Nope. My blood pressure dropped because I was so scared. Mm. And I didn't want to be scared. So I started asking if I could do little public speaking things at colleges. And the first one I did, I was flop sweating during it. It was awful. But I didn't like being scared. I mean, I grew up scared. I don't like being scared anymore. I don't mind being scared. I don't want to be scared to inaction.
Mm.
And so I went to, I worked on it. And now I've stood in front of 18,500 people and spoken a couple of times now, and I love it.
And you've performed in
front of people.
So the performing crowds kept getting bigger. This is fun. And my phone blows up one morning. We're doing this festival, and they want us to play the big stage. So we're not the main act, but we're playing the big stage at the festival, like, think of the festivals have like 7 stages. We were never on the big stage. I was excited. A couple weeks later, my phone blows up and everyone's like, no way, this is going to be amazing. And it's all my Norwegian friends. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I call the guitar player and he's like, how did you do this? And I said, what? That festival always has like the biggest band in Norway as the headliner, like every year. It's one of those bands. And it was this year they decided to spend some money, and the headliner was Brad Paisley. And I was like, oh God. Because outside of a couple people in Forum, nobody knew I was singing. And Brad is one of my clients, and more than that, one of my better friends. And he has no idea I sing. And I'm his opening act.
What?
Yes.
Did you tell him at that point?
Yep. 2 days later, he and the manager and I were together, and I leaned over to the manager and I said, I'm going to tell our boy something that's going to melt his brain. Just know I'm not messing with him, and let the conversation take its course. And he goes, what are you going to tell him? I said, I don't want to explain it twice, Bill. This is a weird one. And so I go, so Norway. And he goes, yeah, we just announced that show. Come with me. He goes, come with me. You always come with me. He goes, I don't think I've ever gone to Europe without you. And I go, I'll be there. And he's like, great. I'm your opening act. And he didn't flinch, and he kept working on his iPad. And then he looked up and went, wait, what? And he goes, why is that funny? I go, it's not funny. He's like, then why did you say it? I'm like, I'm your opening act. He's like, what do you mean? I don't get it. I go, it's not a joke. I have been singing in a Norwegian country band. We've gotten pretty good. I'm your opening act. And I'm horrified. He's like, you don't sing. I'm like, I do. He goes, what do you sing? I said, I do originals. He goes, you don't do originals. I go, I do some originals, and I do they love my Johnny Cash. And he goes, you don't sing Johnny Cash. I go, I do. He's like, then sing. And I'm like, I don't, well, you just want me to start singing? And he goes, yeah. So here he is, Entertainer of the Year, Brad Paisley wants me to just bust out in song. So I did the first line of Hurt from Johnny Cash, and I finished the line, and he goes, holy cats, you're my opening act. And I went, yeah. And I need a favor from you. And he goes, what's that? I said, I need you to be kind. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, we're great friends, but part of why you are so great is because everything is awesome or awful to you when it comes to your craft. And you don't stop until everything you touch is awesome. And I'm not awesome. And I need you to realize this isn't what I'm doing for a living. This is what I'm doing for fun, to have an interesting, cool life. And I just need you to understand that I'm having a good time and don't expect me to be awesome. And he goes, okay. And he's been so supportive since. In fact, he made me his opening act on his 2024 European tour. So I toured Europe as Brad's opening act. Had my own tour bus, put my name down the side. I borrowed it from another artist, and his name was down the side of it. And he's like, you want my bus? I'm like, yeah, but it has your name down the side. He goes, oh, I own the printer. That's how I put my name down the side. I'll put your name down the side. Send me some artwork. So I toured Europe as Brad Paisley's opening act with a tour bus with my name down the side. And we played in front of 10,000 plus people, multiple nights. Iceland, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway.
And this is really based on the decision to live your life like
I was writing a book.
Worthy of writing about.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is I didn't know until today that Scott had actually read 2 books, because Scott doesn't really love to read. And then, in forum, it's like, what do you mean you're going to write a book? You're not a big reader. And so what drove you to tell your story, other than all these amazing stories?
We'll
that you
blame
have?
Cameron Harold for that one.
Okay.
So our forum mate, Hunter Ingram, is friends with Cameron Harold. In doing my public speaking to try and not be afraid of it, got really inspired by some of the reactions. I mean, I feel like I made a massive impact in a young lady's life at one of those talks. And it went from, I'm not just trying to get over the fear, like, I think this could be something I do. I think this girl had dropped out of college that day and went around to all of her classes telling everyone that she was out, came to my talk, and halfway through my talk just started crying, sobbing. And after the talk, I'm like, are you okay? And she said, I hope I wasn't disruptive. I'm so sorry. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I quit. And I told all of my friends I was leaving, and I had penciled in to go to this talk, and I thought I might see someone I know here just to say goodbye. And halfway through your talk and listening to your journey, I went, I'm not quitting. And I started crying when I realized I wasn't going to quit. And I'm so sorry. I hope that wasn't disruptive. And I mentored that young lady a little bit, and she graduated and she went on to her specialty school. She really wanted it. She did great. Mm-hmm. But based on that, I wanted to get better as a speaker. And I said, Hunter, your friend Cam is a great speaker. I've heard he's awesome when he speaks. I know he's an awesome human. I haven't heard it. I've been to one of his talks, but I pretended that I was going to be in Phoenix where he lives, sent him an email after the introduction and said, hey, I'm going to be in Phoenix. I want to take you to lunch. And he said, I'll give you an hour. That's it. I went, okay. And I just wanted some tips. And we hit it off so well that he said, I could only give you an hour because I'm moving. And I thought that was probably a story. And we get back to his place, and he goes, come on, 2 hours into the lunch, he goes, come on, you're coming home with me. And we walk into his house, and there's boxes stacked everywhere. And he goes, honey, open a bottle of wine. We're just hanging out with Scott. And we're sitting out there on his deck, and he said, tell me a story. You want to be a speaker? Tell me a story. I told him a story. And when I finished the story, he said, you're going to write books, and I'm going to have my publisher call you tomorrow. And so I started off doing that. But a friend of mine who's an agent said, I want to see your book. And I was like, well, it's not done. And she's like, so show it to me. And I said, well, I don't know why. I have a publisher. I actually had parted ways with them because they're the ones that really help you write a book. And I didn't like how that read. It didn't feel like me. So we had parted ways, and I was just going to do it myself and then hire them to help me promote it. And she read it, and she read 3 chapters, and I was like, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm going to get you a deal. I go, what do you mean? She goes, you're a writer. I'm getting you a deal. And she'd gotten a bunch of people deals that were all famous. I'm like, I'm not famous. How are you going to get me a deal? She goes, I don't know. But you're a writer. I'm getting you a deal. And it took us a year and a half. But Forefront Books, who's been amazing, picked up Tenacious. And Simon & Schuster's doing distribution. And we're gunning for a bestseller.
This is kind of like an everyman story that becomes a hero. And that's what we all are desiring.
But, you know, I mean, it took me 7 years to write Tenacious. And which brings me back to, I'm not the smartest. I'm not the best looking. I'm not the most talented. I do think that I wrote a book I'm really proud of. And I even say it at the end of the book, like a better man would have written this book in a year. I'm not that man. But I have a book that I wrote that I'm proud of because I didn't give up. And I want the readers to do the same. I want them to pick a dream that's really unlikely. And if it really means something to them, employ tenacity and get it done.
So what's the next book? Have you decided that there's another version of this that you get to do? Because
maybe,
to me, like that is like a great strategy to live your life worthy to have a book written about.
It has been fantastic for me. So many little decisions get made like that. One of the little rules I have is, you know, I travel with work. If I cross a body of water, I don't let myself come home until I go somewhere I haven't been. And so that's led me to just shy of 60 countries now. And I've seen so much and done so much because, you know, even if you're never going to write a physical book, I think, you know, as a book, it's a story. Our lives are a story, right? And so even if you're never going to write a physical book, every day you're writing a chapter that someday you're going to sit on a rocking chair when maybe you don't have the energy to go all over the world and you've kind of done your thing. And you're going to thumb through the pages of your personal book, if you will. You're going to roll through your memories and experience your life. And don't you want that to be as interesting a book as possible?
Well, I mean, what you're doing for me is like the seed is cracked open like your story, but there's other blooming that happens as a result of you telling the story for someone else to go, oh my gosh, I could do the same thing. You know, there is hope. Like, of course, like I should try, right? That's the thing that I've been sitting here this whole time. I'm like fascinated because, you know, it's an inspirational story that like it lays seeds and it gets, you know, more comes out of just the story. And that's why you write. And it helps other people to realize what they could do.
Yeah. I mean, the idea behind the book is I don't present myself as the expert, as the most tenacious person, right? I present myself as the most improved. I went from not being able to try to trying. And because of that, I've seen what happens when you don't try. I've felt the shame. I felt like my life was going to be less. And I now live a life that I'm really proud of. I mean, I have my own tour bus now, and I go visit my clients all the time, and I have a couple hundred great employees. So the book is mostly me as the example, right? So it's my story about whatever, my journey to not giving up and how I went through it. But most self-help books are like, you need to do this. You need to do this. Why aren't you doing it yet? You need to do this. And it beats people over the head with, you know, here's what you need to do. If you tell me what to do, I will do the exact opposite thing. In Tenacious, I try and tell you a story and show you the good, the bad, and let you pick. And I use myself as an example because, frankly, I'm challenged. I have a lot of fear and reservations that want me to stop moving all the time, but I get over them. And so I hope that's the inspiration in the book. But then beyond that, I have a bunch of guests in the book. So I have 17 guests in the book. And so they come in and tell their story. So I talk about my story and I'll say, you know, someone who knows more about that is Olympic skater Scott Hamilton. And Scott comes on and talks a little bit about winning gold, but he talks a lot about fighting brain cancer 3 times. And so I've got guests that do that, and then they throw back to me and we keep going with my story. So it's got my kind of more of an everyman story, but it also has Scott Hamilton, Alan Jackson, Brad Paisley, Dierks Bentley, Chris Young, Garth Brooks, Peter Frampton, Jonathan Cain from Journey, Cameron Herold, Kate Snow, the Weekend NBC anchor, 2 astronauts, Katie Coleman, who lived on the space station for 6 months, a guy named Thomas Marshburn, who's spacewalked a few times, Navy SEAL, high level Navy SEAL. There's levels of that I didn't realize. This is one of the alpha guys for like 17 years. And there are really a vast variety of people, a couple of hockey stars. But the story's the same. They'll all tell you they had these talents. Like some of them had eidetic memories. Some of them had pitch perfect hearing. Some of them were really naturally gifted physically. But they'll all tell you that somebody they knew was better than they were. And that person's fallen to anonymity because they gave up. So they'll all tell you that despite all their talents, being tenacious is the only reason they've lived the life they dreamed.
I've watched Scott start these projects, and he's described a few of them here today. And he goes, well, that didn't work, so I'm going to do something else. And so I think that's part of the reason why these books don't really work for you or in process, somebody telling you to, because he always comes up with something that's better than what he started with or what somebody else told him to do. And it's a joy to watch him do this. I'm so proud of you, buddy.
Oh, I love you, dude. My forum, EO, has been really good for me. It's just a great group of guys. And Eric's enjoyed some of the music with me. We wrote a song called I Hold the Light together.
Yep.
And we got another one coming on my next album that's called I'm Going to Put You in the Ground.
It's real uplifting.
It's a really uplifting tune.
Yeah.
About murder. No, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see.
I hope to make twice as much as I made on the first song, which would be 20 cents. But we're not in it for the money.
Yeah, we're definitely not. Not in music, not anymore.
Scott, you're an incredible storyteller. By far the best interview we've done in this podcast. I am so inspired. I just say thank you.
It's really a pleasure. I really like you guys. I admire what you're doing here. And this is my favorite way to learn, to hear other people's stories. So I was listening to your podcast on the way in and learned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, if you are an entrepreneur here in Nashville and you're looking to hang around other people that are getting things done but having fun, having a life worth writing about, please visit eonashville.com. You can learn how over 350 entrepreneurs in Nashville navigate decisions through an experience called Form. Please visit eonashville.com to learn more. Thanks for watching and hope you have a fantastic day.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.